And guess what? If the man or woman of God has good enough sense and a strong relationship, they don't need nobody to tell them they got out of line. Amen. Some folks try to tell you you out of line when you're not out of line. Amen. But the truth of the matter is, when we get to a point where we have decided that it's not good to study and understand what God is trying to do in our lives, we see what happens in the very streets we live in. The church, historically, was the center of the community. If you look in the New Testament, after a little bit of time, you find that the beginnings of the church really wasn't even just a church. It was the development of a community. And when the community was developed, they were developed according to the Word of God. According to the precept set out by the Apostles' Creed, they were following after the teachings that came directly from Jesus himself. But how did the church get established like that? Because the predecessor was Judaism practice in its proper context. Because when we go into the Old Testament, you find out that the whole nation of Israel was based upon God setting apart a people willing to follow him. The moment they stepped outside of the will of God, they were in prison, they were shut down, they couldn't do anything. They were working on cycles. They were going to a state of depression, into a state of captivity. They found their captivity to be messed up. And they began to pray and said, Lord, get us out. And then you get judges to come along and other people to come along and get them out of their mess. And then they're serving God all over again. But after a while, they go right back. And the cycle would start all over again. Church. That's where we are in 2010. Have you looked on the news? They ain't got a thing to do with people losing their minds. It really has something to do with us. You don't want to hear it, fine, but it's the truth. If we, as the church, historically was a center of the community, and the community is all messed up, there's got to be something going on with us.
All right, man, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Don't believe me? Look at the text. The complaint of God with the nation, he didn't begin with the people. Guess where he started? With the priests.
Yes.
Because the way it was set up, that the spiritual nature and the spiritual things that had to be addressed within the nations began with the priesthood. And suddenly the priesthood lost their mind. And because the priesthood lost their mind, the people lost their mind. And they lacked the knowledge necessary to be effective within the place where they were. And then, what happened? The community went from being thriving, from being effective, to being a community, and you just got to excuse me, but it's in the book, of people that became ignorant, stupid, drunks, and a bunch of whores. It's in the text. They went from being respectable to being a shell of their former self. And God said it had nothing to do with the people except for the priest. Because you did not teach, they are suffering.
Go ahead.
Can I take it a step further?
Go ahead.
The New Testament talks about what we talk about in the Baptist church, about the priesthood of all believers. Now, I always wondered about that thing, so here's the conclusion I came to.
Come on, brother.
Peter calls us a royal priesthood,
Yes.
a holy nation,
Yes.
a peculiar people.
Yeah.
Which means that if we are doing our jobs right, the pastor sets the vision and teaches.
Yes.
Which means that the people who receive it ought to be able to take it forth and teach others. I think your theme verse, and am I right about this? I think your theme verse talks about go ye therefore and teach all nations. How can that happen unless we are being taught? And how can that happen unless we are what? Learning. And if we're not learning, then we're not able to teach.
Yes.
You can only teach that which you know.
Yes.
So the text says, my people are destroyed for a lack.
Yes.
Not a lack of money, not a lack of land, but a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
It's not enough to just know that you're saved. It's more when you know why you are saved.
Yes.
It's not just enough to know that God took your hands and put your hands on the wheel and drove the car. It's the fact that you know that my relationship with God suggests that He will show up and show out when I need Him.
Yes.
Preach, my brother.